Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, people of all ages, welcome back to the Sticky Floors podcast. I am one of your hosts, CJ, and I am joined by Mr. Will. And we both got on hats today because, that's what it is. It's hat. it's hat day. We got our team hats on too, man. I just noticed that you got the Raiders hat on. I got the Steelers hat. Feel like that post Super Bowl thing is washed out of the mouth now. Steelers lost like 6 in a row. I felt like I couldn't wear none of my Steelers stuff for like 2 months. Now I feel like I can bring it back out again. So that's the vibe that we're on. We're back, and tonight we are talking about the movie Dead Presidents. But before we get into that, Mr. Will, how are you doing this evening?
All right, man. What's going on with you, CJ?
Man, I'm chilling, man. As they say in the corporate world, living the dream. That's how that goes, man. That's how that goes. Yeah, man. So for those who are listening for the first time, last week we restarted season 7 seasons. Wow. And we did it with Captain America: Brave New World. So we did our review of that. A lot of good feedback on it too. Really want to give shout outs to everybody who's been commenting on the shows, liking the videos. We'd love for you to continue to like, subscribe, and share the videos as well, and share this content. Really helps our channel to grow. And so we appreciate that. And, for those of you who may not be aware, sometimes on the show, we cover movies that are right in the theaters. And sometimes like this, like tonight, we talk about movies that have been out since the early or mid 1990s, because Dead Presidents is 1995.
Mm-hmm.
So a mix of different shows. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for going on this ride with us.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo the same sentiments. Appreciate the feedback, the comments, the sharing of the movies. The clips of the movies. Really keep that engagement going, because it helps us to bring out and present a better product for you guys.
Absolutely. And so with that said, man, let's jump into tonight. We're talking about Dead Presidents. Mr. Will, you're gonna lay that smooth, silky summary, 1973 summary on us.
Yeah.
Blood.
Okay, there, cat daddy. Dead Presidents is a crime drama action thriller that delves deep into the life of Anthony Curtis, portrayed by Larenz Tate, as he navigates the tumultuous transition from a hopeful youth to a disillusioned adult. The narrative, extensively chronicling the years from Anthony's final days in high school to his mid-20s, exposes the stark realities of post-war America. Anthony, who's neither inherently evil nor destined for a life of crime, finds himself ensnared in a web of social apathy and systemic racism. His journey takes him through the harrowing landscapes of the Vietnam War, only to return home to the Bronx and a different battlefield of inequity, inequality, and economic despair. The sanctity of life is also a reoccurring theme here, as it underscores how precious and delicate truth and honesty can be amidst the betrayal of hardship. Anthony teams up with childhood friend Skip, who's now a drug addict, and Kirby, his mentor, who's also a small-time crook, as well as an assortment of other individuals throughout his life. They're driven to orchestrate a daring bank heist in a desperate bid against the crushing tide of poverty.
There it is. Yo, I gotta say, man, one of my favorite parts of doing this show is listening to your summary of the movie. Because I always feel like if someone has never seen the film, the summary would at least help them to be centered in like what it is that we're talking about. And I think that's dope. That was a really great breakdown for the movie. So just
appreciate that, fam.
give you some flowers, definitely.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And you started talking with Larenz Tate, man, and it's funny. Like we were talking earlier, like Larenz Tate had like this string of movies where I feel like I not only saw them in the movie theaters, but I wanted to see them. Like obviously, this is one we all remember him as O-Dog in Menace to Society. He comes back with The Inkwell, which is like also ironically like a period piece, although without guns and violence and death,
right? Minus that,
minus all the killing. Then he comes back with Dead Presidents. Then he does Love Jones, and like those first three, The Inkwell, Menace to Society and Dead Presidents, I saw like in the movie theaters before, like, when they came out.
Yeah.
And Love Jones I saw a little bit later, but it was like I didn't even realize how much I was going to the theaters or watching Larenz Tate in those like kind of formative years of my early adulthood.
Mm. You know, when you mentioned that this is one of your people's like go to actors, whatever have you,
Mhm.
I was like, all right, that connects because he could be someone that I could see you affiliating yourselves with because of the other people in our collective. Like they embody certain attributes
How
and
about
traits
that?
that he has. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I can see the connection there. He reminds me of such and such. He has
Yeah.
this like yada yada yada. So I get it. I get it. I can appreciate that. Um, I would like to give shout outs to Larenz Tate only because of two movie. Well, I don't know if you want to consider it a movie, but of two things that he's depicted in. One, you already touched upon Love Jones, because that
Hmm.
reminds me of a certain someone that really helped me grow and expand in my personal. And so that movie is very endearing to me. And then the
Hmm.
second one is newer, and that's because of Power. Like
Councilmember
yeah,
Tate.
Cal. Yeah, like the way that he portrays a sniving, conniving,
Hmm.
degenerative snake politician, like it's dope. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't think I'd put those two things together in the same sentence, giving admiration for a portrayal of a corrupt congressman, like especially a black one. Like it just is bugged out. But shout out to Larenz Tate and some of the stories that he tells as far as like his own personal time during that period of coming up as an actor
Yeah.
on when he's on these podcasts and such, like the one where he tells about a mixtape and Halle Berry, at the
Oh yeah, yeah,
Cameron
yeah,
mixtape.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yo, shout out to him for that, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, he's actually very versatile, man.
Yeah,
Like with those kinds of roles that that
yeah,
that he's played over time. And the thing that I was thinking about him, and I don't mean this to be a shade to either actor when I say this,
right.
but he's got this um darn, I just forgot his name. Remember the actor that plays Nicky Santoro in Casino, Joe
Joe
Pesci.
Pesci.
So like how Joe Pesci's got this thing where he's a small guy, right? And Joe
Hmm.
Pesci can do comedy, but you could also buy him as a terrorizing figure
Hmm.
based on like how he plays roles.
Yeah.
Lorenz Tate also has this versatility where I believe him as Darius Lovehall,
Hmm.
but I also believe him as O
Oh
Dog.
yeah.
Like he can do both of those, and it's like he's got like a lot of range. And I think that's why the council member Tate thing worked,
Yeah.
was because in the beginning you don't know that Tate is a dirtbag, but then
Mm-mm.
like two episodes in Power later, then it's like, oh, this dude is sideways like
Hmm.
everybody else on the show. But it really just shows like his versatility. And I think like as it ties into this movie, it kind of helps like when you watch his transition, because
Yeah.
the Anthony in the beginning is just like a good kid, like a
Hmm.
good, nice kid. And like you said at the end, even though he doesn't have like a criminal like kind of mentality, he ends up going to jail for the rest of his life.
Hmm. Well, they said 15 to life. They didn't say he wasn't eligible for parole.
Oh,
So
right. True,
somewhere in the
true.
recesses of my mind, I like to think that he eventually gets out.
We're going to come to that. I got a question about that for you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
dig it. I dig it.
Yeah. So you said, so one of the things you also talked about in the beginning in your summary was like the ideas of like the themes of systemic racism and losing sight and face of the American dream. So what exactly did you mean by that?
Yeah, so um this movie has multiple layers like an onion. So he has to deal with the grim realities like eventually you leave high school and you have to become an adult.
Yeah,
Um and I
whatever that
don't
means.
yeah, and no one actually tells you directly this is the order of things and that this is what that constitutes. I remember having a counselor in school, in high school, your so-called guidance counselor, and I don't know what. And she was a great woman. Don't get me wrong, but she didn't give me guidance, if you will. I got that from my
Yeah.
parents, which I used to juxtapose with Anthony. I didn't see a guidance counselor in here, some type of social worker providing instruction or whatever have you. And at the same token, he comes from a two-family background and he
Hmm.
has an older brother. So it's not like he's navigating these waters
By
on
himself.
his
Yeah.
own. And his brother is actually going to grad school. You
Hmm.
see, and shout out to Isaiah Washington for his quick portrayal in this.
Hmm.
Um, and you see them at the dinner table, and they're eating and they're talking about, hell, His mom, Jennifer Hudson, Jennifer Lewis, shout out to her, saying how proud she is of her college men and this, that, and the third. And father, he seems to be a blue collar worker because he mentions that he was a Marine.
Yeah.
And it seems like a very idyllic lifestyle that they're leading. But at
Yep.
no token have I gotten the feel, if you will, that hey, they discussed his family. They discussed his future plans in depth, and he has verbalized to them repeatedly, or at least one other time, that hey, I want to go into the Marines.
Yeah. That's the conversation that you see happen at the dinner table. Like for the first time, he's like, "No, I want to go to the military. I want to see the world." He even tells his dad, like,
Told me.
like you said that the Marines made a man out of you, right?
Mm.
So he's like trying to figure that part out.
Yeah, and that's the sad part though, because it seems like these are incomplete conversations. It seems like it's a surprise to his mom, and it seems like his
Mhm.
dad, even though proud, didn't really provide him with the full in-depth analysis as far as what it means to be in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, as you mentioned in the pre-production meeting, that he is ill-equipped and ill-advised and misinformed about what it is that he has to do, and forget that he doesn't have these skills on his own to
Yeah.
know, like, hey, this is what I have to do to get to here, and this is where I want to go, and where I envision myself in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's like you said, like that pivotal time of coming out of high school, if you don't have it kind of figured out,
Hmm.
that is like the first place where a lot of people start to fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Because even like modern, forget like 1968 America, but even 2025 America will kind of help you to at least get through high school, or
Hmm.
at least give you something to do to high school. But then a lot of people are faced with this question of what happens next.
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, you can go to college if that's what you want, but college isn't for everybody.
Mm-mm.
Maybe it's a trade school, maybe it's something else. In this case, Anthony chooses the military, which has all kinds of serious negative effects on the rest of his life afterwards. And you see these effects also on his friends, so he's got Jose, he's got Skip, like, Chris Tucker killing it the whole time. And it's like, you see like how this one decision that they make kind of grinds their life up for the future, for everything that comes after it.
You know, First of all, I want to shout out Chris Tucker because this guy is very talented, and um,
Cooking the whole time. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it goes unnoticed sometimes, just as how talented he truly is. I think we look at him and we see a buffoon because of his dramatic, comedic responses and such, or from whether it be Friday or Rush Hour trilogy. But when he can be serious, he is serious. When
Yeah.
he's able to portray the very wide array of human emotions, he does that very well. You may see an old flick of him on Def Comedy Jam doing his Michael Jackson impersonations and stuff. But then when it comes to this, and it comes out in 95 on the back end of, say, a Friday, all of a sudden you're like, that's Chris Tucker?
Yeah. Range.
Wow. Okay. So shout out to him. But with respect to like some of the things that are portrayed in this movie about the grim realities and the harshness of the world, you have like the inequities and the inequalities that are portrayed in this world. You first of all, it takes place in the Bronx, and I want that
Hmm.
to linger out there because the Bronx is the home of hip hop. Second, this is probably one of the better uh, uh, narratives, if you will, about how a town which has a vibrant community goes into utter despair in a matter of 5 years.
Yeah.
You get to see white flight. You get to see the impoverished kids hopping on bed springs and a fire in the middle of a city.
Right. How
Uh,
about that?
yeah, and
Yeah.
just dilapidated buildings. Like he even comments when he gets out of the cab, the old neighborhood has changed, and with it, the people have changed as well. You'll see Cowboy portrayed by Terrence Howard.
Hmm.
One minute he has a conch, the next minute he's rocking a fro. So like all these subtleties and all these Easter eggs, they give it with the proper context. They provide you a very rich and very vibrant understanding as far as what's going on during this period.
Yeah, it really does. And I mean, I think the period point, and whenever I think like period movies, the music is one of the things that really helps to
Mm,
land that. And all throughout this, the music does, it helps to
yeah.
put you in the moment and in the vibe. But yeah, I mean, the way that neighborhood transitions, it reminds me a lot of like kind of the neighborhood I grew up in the sense of, there was a closer kind of relationship and connection between like the older adults and the
Mm.
kids in positive and sometimes not positive
Yeah.
ways. So like Anthony's a nit like the first time he has the fight with a cowboy
Mm-hmm.
in the pool hall is something that can really happen
Mm.
when you're a little bit outside the lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a real thing. But the part that you said about how the everything transitions, to me when I'm watching this movie, it's like the beginning of like the collapse of that American dream.
Yeah.
So like Anthony's parents are living in a household, big nice house, at least from the outside. They got good food and everything. You see the life that Anthony and Juanita have is
Mm.
much different. And you see like this kind of idea of so many people around Anthony are either having their businesses fold, like his the
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 deli guy, the
yeah, the
butcher.
deli guy, the butcher, right? So the butcher. So you have like small the small businesses closing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have like this sort of growing of the underground economy of like, like the Cuddy and Cowboy and like this sort of underground ways where people are making money because a lot of times out of desperation. And then like very kind of in the nuances of the film, you have like this idea of like the Black Power movement now growing as a way to combat this fading American dream.
It's funny that you comment on that too, because one, a lot of people witness the upheaval because after this period, you have Jimmy Carter, rest in peace, coming in, and you're dealing with the gas crisis, and you're seeing long lines of cars
Mm,
lining up for gas during this period. So you're seeing the very upheaval of the economic status quo throughout that period.
yep.
And so then you have Reaganomics. And so, you're witnessing firsthand how these things originate and how they affect the various so-called minorities in these films. So that's chief amongst them. You mentioned also about like Cuddy having his own business and such, and he even references like the pool hall never really generated money. It was his ability to have side hustles, in
Yeah,
particular.
Kirby. You mean Kirby?
Kirby, sorry about that.
Yeah, Kirby.
And managing to have side hustles, in particular
Hmm.
the numbers racket, and that was a real big thing in
Yeah.
the black community. Whereas that was the version of the lotto.
Yep.
The lottery, and you can see all these black people interacting, whether it be the middle class, industrious individual, the guy who's a mechanic maybe or a dentist, living in the same community as the housewife who was being very flirtatious with Anthony, versus the pool hall hustler. Like you have all these different types of individuals coming and going, but they're all able to respect each other's boundaries and
Yeah.
interact with each other on a mutual understanding of like, hey, you get it how you get it, I get it how I get it, but we're all black at the same time, and this is our commonality.
Yeah.
Um,
And oh, good.
and I just want to touch upon to just that aspect itself, where this is a young kid that's being protected by that same very community, with the
Hmm.
exception of the cowboy incident. But for the most part, they're like, "Hey, young blood, hey, how's it going?" Like he's known throughout, and he's able to garner a certain amount of respect.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Because he's also, and that's the thing. I mean, like all men want respect,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and there comes a point where for us, we don't want to be seen as boys anymore.
Yeah.
And I think like that and there's like a couple ways I think the movie gets into that. One is, of course, the relationship between Anthony and Juanita. For him, like the rite of passage is like them being able to have this kind of intimate sexual relationship, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's, and everybody, knows and goes through like that pressure of trying to get to your quote unquote first time. And then he's got like the idea of like, as he said in the movie, like I want to become a man and I want to go out and like sort of carve my own path, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like I don't want to do like my older brother did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, people do that. And then there's like dang, I'm back in this world now.
Mm.
How do I feed a family? How do I take care of myself?
Yeah.
How do I try to create the life that I saw growing up? Not absent of the reality that all these tectonic kind of plates and all the stabilities that were there have now eroded because so many of the soldiers when coming back from the Vietnam War didn't get the support they needed, didn't get the therapy they needed, didn't get the substance abuse assistance
Mm-hmm.
they needed, which is one of the reasons why it's that collapse is so sudden in that just like that 5-year time span.
And it's funny you mentioned that too, with respect to Anthony and the upheaval at his being able to find a job, let alone being
Yeah.
able to maintain that. and the sense of dignity and pride it comes with that. Like that's part of the major tenets as far as being a man, handling your responsibility, being employed. Like the running joke is always, you can't come home to a black woman and tell her you don't have a job. Or Chris Rock saying like his grandmother telling him a black man without a job is just like a broken hand. It's no good. It's no usage. Um,
I mean, yeah, that's like in Soul Food. Like, do you remember the movie Soul Food when the dude loses his job
mhm.
and they're like, "No, you can't say you don't have a
Nah,
job."
yeah,
Like they gave him the other guys give him
giving him,
money, so like
yeah.
gives like yeah, just yeah, I got you.
And
It's true.
it touches upon that whole thing about like someone co-signing you, if you will. So in Soul Food, it was the ex-boyfriend of his wife hooking him up with the job, but there was an ulterior motive there. And it
Yes,
borrows along that lines of Cuddy, who's a pimp,
yes.
doing that as well. And then at the same time, in what's the movie with Janet Jackson and what's her name? Jill Scott, the Tyler Perry movie.
Oh, what's I think I live my no. I know you're talking about
Yeah,
Why Did I Get Married?
yeah. Why did I get married? In the second part, what you call it? What's the bald headed dude? He hooks up his ex wife Jill Scott or her husband with the job or whatever to be a police officer, and he confronts
Oh
her.
yeah,
But little does he know he has cancer. I use those three examples to say this: when Larenz Tate is coming home and he's trying to, um, reestablish who he is in this new universe, because he even says, "Hey, I didn't write people because that stuff will get you killed. I left
yeah,
that behind. I was in the moment. I had to be here. I had to basically dead that version of myself. He didn't exist it. And then when I got home, then I could,
hmm
recommit myself to that new world. So he does that, and at every turn he's getting disrespected, and it takes
yeah,
pieces and pieces away at what he perceives as his manhood, his inability to provide a stable, structured environment, whether that be a physical home for him and his newfound family,
yeah,
or the mental abuse that he's even disturbed at night with the night terrors, and
yeah.
or his understanding that his uh, significant other, because I don't think they were ever married, has
No, they weren't.
betrayed him in that she has given herself to another man, and a pimp of all people, and that guy is sitting there saying our daughter or my
Yeah,
girl, and it's like, wait, what?
yeah.
And then
Cuddy's way outside the lines, man. He is. Cuddy,
as
Cuddy is way outside the lines. But there's something that you said about
gross understatement.
him saying that when I was out there, I didn't want to like think about the world, and it's funny because like that juxtaposition of like what does it mean to be in the military and how you're cut off from society is actually where he ends up in the end,
Mm-hmm.
in jail, still cut off from society. Like the movie book ends that
Mm-hmm.
idea that Anthony doesn't get to be present
Mm-hmm.
with his family
Ever.
in his life the way that he wanted to be or the way that they needed him to be. And that's like one of the tragedies of the film.
That is a dope breakdown of the movie right there in itself. The inability to establish connections with loved ones while you're there,
Yeah.
and then the second chance, if you will, that you're given, and still the inability to reaffirm that bond that you may have had with those loved ones. Like, though, that was the reason why he went overseas anyway, to go fight in the war, because he wanted to establish himself as a man who's able to provide for a family. And to have his parents, in particular his father, be proud of him because he
Yeah.
was following in his footsteps. He saw, and with great admiration, acknowledging, like, hey, the Marine Corps did this for you. It should be able to do that for me as well. And shout out to Seymour Castle, who played Saul, which is the guy at the butcher shop that gives him a shot. So he's supposed to represent, the Jewish community and the ties between the Jewish community and the Black community. So like a lot of these Easter eggs that are thrown throughout the movie, if left if left undiscovered or not brought up, you would just glance over it as circumstantial. But the Hughes brothers do a great job of subtly putting in these things and then tying them up together throughout the movie.
Yeah. And it's an ambitious film
Yeah.
because like and it's ambitious maybe to a fault in
Yes.
some ways, but it's like they try to tell the period piece. They tell this war story in the middle of it, and then they try to tell this post-war story as well. The military part, the war part is violent,
Yes.
it's traumatic, it's psychologically, physically damaging. The things that you see Anthony experience, the things you see Skip experience, knowing Jose gets his hand blown off,
Yeah.
they're all damaged, either physically or psychologically, or
Or both.
both,
Mm-hmm.
as you would say, before they even come back to the world. And even that first scene, like when Anthony gets out of the car and he sees Skip, and Skip is high, middle of the daytime, out front of the store, like that's just a showing of like how sad the situation has become. And even, like when Skip is walking Anthony to his house, he's joking. And Chris Tucker, you mentioned it before, he's so good at being serious, but then still being Chris Tucker and being funny. But it's like there's a certain sadness that's in him the whole movie. Even when he walks Anthony to his house, they kind of keep the camera on him, and you see like that smile that he had sort of fade away, and he goes back to that sadness that he had because of the things he's seen, and because of the way his world is now.
Not just that. I think we can further expand upon that by he doesn't go to the doorsteps. He jokes in a defensive manner about being
Taking care
intimate
of
with
his
his
mom's kid.
mom.
Yeah.
He also it harkens back to when they first talk about him arriving, and Anthony's writing the letter to Kirby saying like, "Oh, he hasn't really fully adjusted." And even while in Vietnam, they talk about how real briefly between the two of them, "Oh, you failed out of Hunter College. You never
Mm-hmm.
thought that you'd get here. You thought that this was an easy way out, that you'd be on some like, minuscule job, and you would just fast forward through these next 4 years without any real confrontation." Because he's like, it beats being a
Yeah.
grunt, whatever have you, and knowing that the life expectancy as a grunt was very limited. And then last but definitely not least, he freezes, resulting in Dugan getting killed, their
Yep.
lieutenant. And it's like, well, these things happen. He's only human. It's not as if he was born, bred, and engineered in a laboratory to be this killing machine. And I think
Yeah.
that point of your humanity being lost due to these atrocities that you're forced to confront on a day in and day out basis, it's going to be tiring. It's going to weigh upon you. Anthony's coping mechanism of desensitizing himself to the violence by saying, "Hey, I'm here, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'll excel at that." It's a very nice contrast, a very stark reminder as to how individuals in those situations confront their fears and their destiny head on.
Yeah, man. Like Master Killer said, war is extremely serious,
And
and it saddens me to have to take
take
things to
things to
deadly
deadly
measures.
measures.
Like that's and have you measured and shot for no pay. It's
Assassination
assassination
day.
day. I stalk my enemy like prey. All
Pray.
right, let me stop because I was in it. I was hit right with the Tetris drop. Tetris drop. Oh man, but yeah, man, like they're going through that, and it's funny you mentioned the part about he still writes Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't write everybody else, but he writes Kirby. Like Kirby is sort of his model. Kirby is like his guy.
Mm-hmm.
Kirby is his mentor,
Yes.
and so he sees Kirby even when they're young. Like he sees Kirby like knock a
Mm-hmm.
lady out and
Yeah.
threaten to kill a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so Kirby's kind of always got one foot in the streets anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like the mental model for Anthony in many ways, maybe even more so than his father.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So it's like that he ends up running this crazy bank heist with Kirby and his friends. It makes sense because like he's always kind of seen that that's how you gotta get it out the mud, as they say.
I think he only does the heist because Kirby's the one who says, "Hey, I'm not going to do it unless you do it," and he's the one who brings it up. I also think the fact that how he tries to model himself after Kirby, after like when he witnesses all this, he's like, "Yeah, me and Kirby," like it echoes, and then it fast forwards to him being in the bush and running, and Kirby mentioning like, "Hey, I lost my leg in Korea," and
Yeah.
and that actually reverberates with Anthony in such a way that he almost is like, man, if only I could. It's like almost inferred, like if I could do, be of some type of service and that level of commitment, and if
Yeah.
I so happen to get maimed over there, I'll be like my idol Kirby. I think the
Yeah.
other thing too that so we're talking about the loss of innocence and the shattered dreams, in addition to the other topics we covered, such as inequalities and inequities. But I think that the thing that reverberates over all of this is trauma. and how they deal with it, whether it be from an eco-socioeconomic standpoint to just the interpersonal growth and development, how it's stagnated. You know, Larenz Tate's character, you know, he lives in an environment, like I said before, in the Bronx. And we all know how the Bronx slow decay and then a rapid progression of like all this utter turmoil to now where it's being gentrified to such a degree. So you're dealing with the redlining aspects, you're dealing with the white flight, you're dealing with all these different social reasons and the systemic racism that's implanted in this environment. Yet amongst it all, he's expected to be this pillar of the community when there's a lack of resources to help him cope with coming back and being integrated into this community. So you got the PTSD, you've got the fact that like this guy is in a situation that's cyclical, inevitable, and unavoidable throughout the entire duration of the film. And it just stuns me how no one picks up on this. Chris Tucker says, you know, I get 50% of health benefits or something like that. And it's like, wait, time out. You didn't lose or get maimed or anything out there. And he says, no, I get blood checks. And this is an allusion to Agent Orange, where they were spraying the fields with this cancer-inducing chemical, and that the guys over there were breathing it in. And I'd be I would be remiss if I didn't say, you know, kudos to all the individuals throughout the entire planet who have served their country in any type of armed conflict, or for that matter, just standing on a wall, keeping guard. You know, it takes a lot of devotion, sacrifice, and commitment to maintain that type of ability. And so shout out and kudos to all those individuals.
Yeah, man. I mean, and it's a great point because all of these people they've gone through extreme trauma, and for someone like Skip never gets the help that he needs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Jose never gets the help that he needs. Anthony never gets the help that he needs, and this is what they experience like at a formative time in their lives. Like they go
Mm,
into the military 18, 19 years old. They're not even adults yet themselves, and they
mm,
have to deal with the trauma of having seen people that they know personally getting killed in front of them, killing people, watching people die. Like that's a traumatic experience, and the irony of it is that that's still happening to this day. It
mm-hmm,
happens in many cities in America where you see like young people that go to school and then the next day their classmate or their friend has been killed, and that's happening at
mm-hmm.
even younger ages now in a
Oh yeah.
greater frequency than it was happening even then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very tumultuous time and place, regardless of the actual date that these events transpire. I mean, literally, a very captivating and poignant scene is Anthony having to deliver the high dosage of morphine to one of his fallen
Right, great
comrades.
scene.
Like even preceding that, I mean, this guy has his intestines exposed and his personal parts are inserted into his mouth, and
Crazy.
he's left with a leaflet, a pamphlet, a letter saying, you know, black soldiers go home. This
Yep.
is not your fight. So there's the attempt of solidarity amongst melanated people trying to expose the hypocrisy of the so-called United States of America. Um, I think another thing that really like solidifies this is not just the post and pre and post war events, but it's also the impact of crime in the areas
Yeah,
in which these guys
no doubt.
live, and how it has changed them fundamentally, like left these scars. You mentioned, you know, Skip being outside of the local, you know, bodega, deli, whatever have you, in a very uh, just depressed
He
state.
was high.
All I'm trying to be
He
generous
was
because I
high.
don't know what we can say or what we can't say, but let's just say he was inebriated. Nonetheless, he's out there, and all of a sudden it cuts to Cowboy, another scandalous
Yeah,
individual,
he's I hate Cowboy.
another serpent, and it allows for a sort of closure too, if you will, because Anthony is not only able to come back in a new light and to be seen even more of a hero of more prominent stature amongst the citizens in his community, you know, as he's walking down into the street and then eventually into the pool hall.
Yep.
And even that scene itself where it seems like he's gliding with his
Yeah.
hat tilted to the side and such, and they're giving him, you know, free drinks, and he's coming down with a cigarette looking all cool and stuff. And I'm not advocating cigarette smoking, folks, but the way he just comes down and depicting all of these stereotypes, and then all of a sudden, it fast forwards to him getting a rematch with Cowboy, whatever have you, and Cowboy, he's able to tolerate a lot of Cowboy's nonsense until eventually he goes a little bit too far where he says where my man Cuddy was getting, and then all of a sudden he didn't get to finish the sentence. He's breaking him off something with a pool stick, and then eventually the killer cool line is, and that's game.
Yeah.
And then
and I remember that scene. I remember that when he said that. Yeah.
And just the way he delivers that line, it provides the closure. And in the background, even a miss when it's about to jump off, Jose is immediately going to come to his man's defense, thinking he needs it. But then Kirby's like, this is an A kicking, long time coming.
Yeah.
And so like Cowboy able to take advantage of the nature and the dynamic of their relationship. Here's a vulnerable kid, as you mentioned before, who's not fully of stature, to now here comes this killing machine who's now a grown man with strength and experience behind him. And that whole scene symbolizes the movie in its entirety up until that point. Meaning there's a coming of age movie. Mm-hmm. There is a sense of loyalty and commitment and family bonds. There is the individual actually experiencing now what it's like to be a boy and now a man, which are two totally different than the whole coming of age experience. Coming of age is more like the scene where he's having his first intimate scene and he's not knowing what goes where and how things go off, versus, now I know because I've matured and I've grown into who I am and who I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
I mean, this scene really solidifies this movie as, when it hits, it hits.
Yeah.
And that was one of the scenes that hit.
Yeah. And that's a good segue into the scenes in the movie, parts of the movie that we liked to go into the cake. So I'm going to just drop a couple of things there, and you hit on some of it. I like the scene. One of my favorite scenes is a scene where Anthony is first running away from Juanita's house the night after they have their first time, and he's running, he's jumping over the things, and you start to hear like the military radio sounds in the background, and he keeps running, and then it turns into him running through the desert, the jungle. I just like that transition. I just thought it was a really clever way that scene was going, and I thought it showed like how rapidly his life changed, and how like something so innocent or semi-innocent became like literally running for his life. Like he thought he was running for his life, but now he's really doing it for real. So that was one of the scenes I liked. So like the other two scenes is like they're about my man Cuddy. Like Cuddy's like he's a great movie villain, man. The first one is the Cuddy introduction scene when Juanita and Anthony are sitting in the car and Cuddy drives up with that lollipop. Talk like Cuddy is he's like one of those, he's like a guy who is very plugged into this idea of like dominance hierarchy, right? He's always exuding dominance over Anthony the whole time, every time they come into contact with each other. But that first scene, like with his hat and the car and the lollipop, and in the way that he drives off before she can introduce him to Anthony, just a brilliant, it tells you everything about the character before you even know enough about him. Like it's like in those couple minutes, like he's cooking. Like shout outs to the actor for that one.
Clifton Powell,
shot right. And he still plays like kind of like those roles now to this day. It fits him so well, man. And
that's Chauncey's Pops.
Yeah. And it works. It just works for him. And then the last one is when he knocks out Anthony. Like their whole conversation. It's such a good scene, because like I think as an audience, I know for me, I'm rooting for Anthony. Like Anthony is 1000% right. And I think like the first time I remember watching this, I was like, oh, Anthony's about to beat Cuddy. He about to kick Cuddy's butt, right? But that's absolutely not what happens. Cuddy is like, once again, there's like a dominance hierarchy that he has over Anthony that just, it keeps getting reinforced in the film. And those two scenes, like you said, Clifton Powell is just magnificent in them, playing that like pimp black Dracula kind of thing that he's doing. Like the end, he's dressed like Dracula. He is, but it works. You know what I mean? Like it works, even down to the fingernails, but it works. That's my cake. I'm sticking to it. What you got for your cake?
Wow, man, you must like what is it? Devil's food cake, man, because whatever it is, what's the joint? It ain't Angel's Food Cake. It's Devil something.
No,
Whatever.
yeah, the black one, the black cake.
Yeah, yeah. Because that joint is that's wicked, man. I am flabbergasted. In case folks didn't know, we'll get to it later, but just remember this right here, this topic right here. As far as the things I liked about the movie, I definitely like the reoccurring themes that we didn't touch upon, such as like the impact of the poverty that inner city youth, in particular, melanated people, have to experience during this particular point in time. I just being a historian, I like that it shows like, hey, there wasn't a prosperity at one point, and then all of a sudden there was a decline to where there's just outright poverty. I love the fact that it also touched upon some of the things we've already covered, such as, the lack of support that veterans received when coming back into the United States. But I like the fact that it mentions the contradictions within the various social programs that either exist or don't exist outright altogether, and the need for that. And then the hypocrisy that, all these wars are being engaged, yet there wasn't a war on poverty.
Yeah,
there was a war on crime, there was a war on drugs, but there wasn't a war on poverty. Outside of those things, I also liked the various cameos. CJ touched upon them. Clifton Powell is the guy that you love to hate. Whether it be in this particular movie or in Menace to Society, he's in a tremendous. His filmography is tremendous. I like the fact of the soundtrack.
Fantastic.
That scene. I talked about this with CJ before. The scene that really reverberates for me to this very day, that is very poignant, is Chris Tucker sitting alone in his apartment room in the dark.
Great scene.
With the black and white TV in front of him, where he's watching Al Green on Soul Train, hearing "I'm So Tired of Being Alone," and you see the hypodermic needle stuck in his arm. And the police roll up on him, and so he's already checked out. It is so touching that, like, back in '95 when I first saw that scene, it got me choked up. Can't lie. It was very an emotional scene, and it was done so very brilliantly and very delicately. Like, it was just a masterclass in how to segue, the pitfalls that individuals may face when dealing with mental issues on their own.
Yeah.
I definitely like the fact that, outside of Chris Tucker's brilliant performance, which I think he should have gotten some type of an award for if he hadn't for that. I like the fact that it had an Isaiah Washington, it had a Jennifer Lewis, it had a Michael I'm butchering his name, but the dude from Sopranos, Imperioli.
Mm-hmm.
It had Sticky Fingers in there. It had a whole bunch of character actors in there. Like, everybody got their time and they did well. Like, Bokeem Woodbine, from being this lunatic to all of a sudden this fraud as a pastor, he does it well. I'm like, wow, this dude's got some serious acting chops. I remember him in what's the joint that he did? Static or I forget the gun movie he did that he first came out.
It might have been called Static or something like that.
Yeah,
it might have been the title.
But either way, like, he has grown in his role in his space as an actor, so I definitely want to give him props for that. I love the Kirby fight scene where he eventually hops on the ground and rolls up on the dude with the little 38. Yeah. It's just like, yo, you better have my money. After punching out whoever, his daughter or his wife, or whomever.
His wife, like,
yo, this dude is raw and uncut.
Yeah.
And I definitely like the scene where Anthony is choking out Terrence Howard with the pool stick in the pool hall.
Yeah.
Like, some of these things, they really get theirs off. And in case I hadn't said it before, I'm going to say it again. The period piece of this is basically the black version of the 4th of July meets Bubba Blue, not Bubba Gump, Bubba Blue, if he didn't have any mental disabilities / the prequel to Menace to Society. I like that piece. What you got with the hate, man?
Yeah. Couple things. More like, I think, like, one of them is an end scene, but I think just in general, and I said this a little bit in the beginning, I think the movie is a little bit too ambitious in terms of like what it's trying to do. It probably would have done better if it just focused on telling one story. And I think there's like storylines that don't really get the development that they probably would need. Like, there's a lot that could have been done, I think, about the idea of like how the Black Power movement in that time in the Bronx, what did that mean? Like, how did that kind of start to shape and influence the people around it? You see that a little bit through the Delilah character, but not
Yeah.
as much as
Shout
I
out to
think we.
Nibushi, right?
Yeah, always shout outs to Nibushi, right? They could have had that there, but they didn't. Like one of my big things, and in movies in general, is like how it ends. It feels
Mm.
like they like decided, okay, this movie can only be like an hour and 50 minutes, and maybe it's longer than that. But then
Mm.
they shot an hour and 40 and was like, yo, we gotta close this out. And then the last 10 minutes is so fast, it doesn't give you a chance to really resolve these hanging items like what's the status of Anthony and Juanita's relationship?
Mm.
How does Juanita feel about Delilah being killed while robbing a bank with Anthony? You know what I mean? Like, how does Anthony feel about Skip overdosing? Like you miss these really like kind of deep emotional moments because it goes from, bank, like worst bank robbery ever to Cleon's, diamond everybody out to now Anthony is on, a busted jail for the rest of his life. And then this is the worst bank heist ever on film, man. And we've seen some good ones, we've seen some bad ones. I thought like
miserable fail.
I thought the reindeer games one was a disaster, but this one is 1,000 times worse.
It's ridiculous.
And is not successful. And it's kind of, I always thought it was odd that a group of men who were in the military and had to have like sense of discipline, organization, planning, counter planning, contingency plan, like they didn't have none of that in this. It was like, there was no way it was going to work. So those are the things that kind of fell apart for me with it, man.
I want to touch upon some of it. Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. There's a few things. So in the order you gave it, the reverse order you gave it, the non-meticulous planning, they got a bomb expert who blew his own hand off. That should have been enough for me to be like, yo,
not a good pick.
Thanks. We're not picking you for this team.
Not a good pick. Yeah.
Then he's a father who has 5 children and he's married. So you mean to tell me Marisol lost her husband, the father of her children? They were going to give her a share, but guess what? The police confiscated that money, so she's out of everything.
Yeah, it's a failure.
So yeah, I definitely agree that this is a failure of a 1 hour and 59-minute movie.
No, I said it's a failure of a plan, not a failure of 1 hour and 50-minute movie. I want to clarify my perspective on it.
I get it, but I said what I said. Movie. Then I don't like the Juanita character. She is a trifling woman of the night. That's as diplomatic and as best as I can put it.
Okay.
There's no loyalty. There is no sense of respect. There is no symbiotic relationship, admiration, devotion. She's devoid of everything, any honest feeling whatsoever. Her boyfriend was a pimp. She didn't decide to say, "Hey, mom, I'm struggling. Can I stay at home too with your granddaughter? I don't want to be forced to live in a cockroach-infested apartment building susceptible to a high crime rate. No, yeah. I'm going to stick it out. I'll come home from time to time, see my sister living it up, going to school. I'm working because remember, the so-called rule is you're either going to have a job or you're going to have, or you're going to be in school, but you're not going to be lying around the house doing nothing. Well, she's working, taking care of her granddaughter. Why is she forced out? But whatever. That segues to Cuddy. That may be CJ's main man, but he's a despot. And I'm trying to be very diplomatic and expand my vocabulary while doing this because I would call him some very utter, gutter, trash stuff that let me remain composed. I don't like those two characters.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm sorry. Good.
No, please.
No, but I mean, like, it sounds like you're saying they did a great job with those characters.
What I'm saying is that they could have. What I'm saying is that the Hughes brothers could have used another vehicle in order to present a compelling argument that these are the depravities that individuals have to find themselves amongst.
Yeah, but isn't Cuddy a great villain?
I would say,
isn't he a great villain? If you detest him that much, isn't he a great villain?
It's a credit to Clifton Powell's acting abilities.
Agreed.
I would definitely give him that.
Agreed.
I would say that I have a problem when a grown man is introduced to me licking a lollipop and they focus on his red tongue and his pink lips looking at me as if he's a serpent. I'm sorry. I can't. All I needed for him to do was to stick out a forked tongue and be like, yo, I am the living incarnate of Lucifer.
He's that dude. Yeah, that's true.
I'm not. And he's lean to the side like this. Yep. Like, nah, you're not going to roll up on me and my woman. You should have just kept it moving.
Yep.
And which goes back to Juanita even entertaining this dude. You didn't introduce me from the rip. You didn't shut the conversation down. You're accepting $200 from this dude repeatedly.
Yeah.
Nah, you didn't tell me that you were involved with somebody.
Yeah.
Nah, shorty.
Yeah.
We can't do that. Nah.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I have a problem with the pace of, like you did, of the third and fourth scenes and
Yeah.
acts. I didn't feel, as you would put it, they did not stick the landing.
No, they didn't.
So I'm not rocking with that. And like you said, the overall screenplay story, what's the meaning of it all? What are they trying to say? They're trying to say a lot, but they really didn't, stand out and say, hey, it's A, B, and C, not 1, 2, 3.
So that's a great segue into the questions, because actually the screenplay is the first question, the first one I have a question about. Yeah. So, all right, this is obviously 1995 when this movie came out. Mm-hmm. We're in 2025 now. Mm-hmm. Let's say this screenplay is written today, right? Do you think it's most likely that this ends up being an A24 film, A24 that did like a Civil War and kind of like a semi-independent movie kind of studio thing? B, that it ends up being like a Max miniseries during Black History Month, of course. Or that C, it never gets greenlit at all.
I can see all of those happening in different versions of our timeline. That, hey, we can't make this movie because if we get here, we've got to deal with the sensibilities of a certain group feeling as if they should feel ashamed for being colonizers and enslavers. At the same token, I could see this doing better as a mini series / a Netflix series where they can delve into these topics more thoroughly and branch out and flesh out these characters with the due respect that they're deserving of. Because who knows, maybe the motivations of Juanita was she was taken advantage of. She was struggling. She too was naive and innocent. And then she was thrust into survival mode. And like Tupac said, we should be marveling at the fact that this rose grew out of the concrete instead of commenting on, oh, the petals are messed up. There's thorns here and there.
And remembering that, of course, concrete is not the optimal soil for a rose to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. So I get that. And the fact that, this could be a very well done independent movie. So, I could see all things happening.
Yeah, I like it. I think the miniseries idea, that would be a good thing because it would allow some more depth to go into the characters. All right, here's my next question. And this is this deals with Anthony in the neighborhood, right? Okay. So my question is, okay, we all know how it ends. Anthony ends up, in jail for at least 15 years, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. But how do you think the neighborhood will remember Anthony? Will he be remembered as a cautionary tale? Will he be remembered as like a revolutionary or a hero? And that might be more because of his semi-connection with Delilah and the Black Power movement at that time. Or do you think the neighborhood will just forget him altogether?
All of the above. There'll be certain people who will want to forget him and will forget him. So it might be the older populace where they're like, he had so much potential, but now he's a cautionary tale of what not to do. Forget him. How could he embarrass his family like that? So, it could be a little bit of both. And then there are those who are more vigilant of what's going on in their neighborhood. And they're like, yeah, you know what? It's time for us to be more militarized. It's time for us the revolution is here. It's time for us to be more proactive in our communities and to foster groups like the Black Panther, like the Crips, like the Bloods, et cetera, et cetera.
There it is. All right. A lot of tragedy. We talked about like the tragic arc for so many of the characters in this film. I think I know what your answer might be here, but I'm not sure. Whose character arc do you think is the most tragic in terms of where they start at and then like kind of what their ending is?
Wow. I'm going to say Skip.
I figured that you would say.
I'm going to say Skip. What you said before. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't seem like he ever had. You don't ever see any mentioning of his parents. He always talked about being a pimp in a joking manner, but but he's a lonely pimp. You know what I mean? He had 2 girls on his arm, and now he goes from that to nothing. He was the star of the show, and he's like the guy who climaxes in high school. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it's downhill from there because he's not equipped or he's ill-equipped with how to handle the pressures that life thrusts amongst us.
Yeah. Skip is not, if he is a pimp, he's not effective at it because he never has a stable or anything like that.
Well, what do they say? Pimping is easy and pimping ain't easy simultaneously. Well, there you go.
Yeah. That might be in the Cuddy. Maybe it's the Cuddy manual or something.
I guess so.
All right. Last one. Yo, so we talked a little bit about Larenz Tate and his roles that he's played, and a couple of them because he's played other roles too as
Yeah.
well. What's your most memorable Larenz Tate character?
Easy. Oh, dog, man. Hurry up and buy. I feel sorry for your mother. You feel sorry for who? Like,
O Dog is a good
yeah,
one, man. That everybody remembers O Dog.
Yo, he is like, I don't wish to glamorize it, but he is like the dude. He's what the Black Panthers morph into, where they just don't have. They've had enough. He is NWA on some like, yo, F the police. He's just not channeling that energy in a more constructive means. But he is what happens when, like Tupac said, we shall overcome, we marching. And then all of a sudden, we asked with the Panthers. I mean, we asked with Malcolm and Martin. Now with the Panthers, now it's just, I kick in the door, guns blazing. I see you dancing with all this food and throwing salami. He says, that's O-Dog.
Yeah. O-Dog is, and in that time period, especially after the Black Panthers are destroyed, then
this gives rise to that.
It lives intentionally.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Intentionally, right? That's it. That's a part of the plan.
Yeah. Well, to get rid of the Black Messiah, as Hoover announced, you know what I mean? So there you have it.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
All right.
You got some questions for me?
Most definitely, man. I'm always curious as to the inner workings of the man known as CJ. All right. So question number one for me. We're just going to start off with something light. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you pick this film, man?
Yeah, this is so Dead Presidents is it's probably like has a lot to do with like the last movie we did, because we did Captain America, and this idea of like a Black man kind of struggling with the role that he has to play in the society, right? We saw that with Sam Wilson's character. In this movie, like you kind of see this too with Anthony Curtis, who's also taken on this very pro-American, pro-patriot role,
Right.
but also then realizes like this country that he's literally sacrificed, like given his life to, is really cold to him on the back end of it. And Martin Sheen's criticism of him at the end, like saying like, you didn't fight in a real war, I'm not going to grant you any leniency whatsoever, and giving him almost life in prison, is like the flip side of this sense of loyalty that Anthony has, that this country does not give back to him. And I felt like, when we talked about Captain America last week, those movies are not meant to really get into that kind of discussion. Like when you see Sam Wilson, everybody accepts that Sam Wilson's Captain America. Right. Nobody's like, where's the white Captain America? That's the real one. Even though we know in real life, that's what would happen. Right. This movie kind of deals more with like, okay, if you strip away like the Marvel comics stuff and the superpowers and the vibranium wings, what happened? Like, how were Black soldiers treated in like a more of a realistic context? So that's kind of what brought me to this movie as a follow-up to what we did last week.
I got you. It makes sense. I dig it. I can appreciate that.
It's a method to the madness.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that clarification. It helps to understand you a little bit more in the inner workings as far as how these movies are a cohesive assignment.
Appreciate it.
How were drugs used at different points in the movie?
Drugs is like the supporting cast of this film, because like there's like you talked about Agent Orange, a drug. You see the impact that has on Skip, but you also have the rise of heroin, and you see like how the heroin we like the idea that drugs were flooded into Black communities to destabilize them, to, as you said, do things like disrupt the rise of a Black Messiah. Those things are documented. They're historical truths, right? So we don't even have to debate that. But it's like you see that undercurrent, and then even for Anthony, you see like alcoholism. Like, what is that doing to him? Like there's like all these men are experiencing trauma, and they're trying to self-medicate, as so many people do to this day. And the drugs is a part of it, and no one's getting the help that they need. And instead they're being treated as criminals, when actually, they got substance abuse problems, they got all these other things. And that continues to this day. Like those are still issues that we see now. So it's like the drug part is a big thing. It's also probably why they did one of the worst bank robberies in history, because they're all different states, different states of inebriation, as you said, or being high as hell, and not being able to figure out how to do a bank robbery.
I mean, you got Jose in the back of the Black Continental talking about, do you want a bump of speed? All the way
Yo,
to
right, exactly.
Juanita
There's
saying, I told you to get some help for that alcohol. Like, she's not
yo,
sympathetic whatsoever.
they all have like these brothers got real problems, and they're all trying to like self medicate, and that's the drug thing is big in this. It's a big part of the movie.
Yeah, definitely. So is the military an extension of the Matrix then?
Yeah, the whole thing is like the Matrix.
Mm,
Like the Matrix isn't. I don't know, man. I know like people will say like, oh, we live in a like a simulation. I don't know what that part is, but it's. I think we all do follow a certain program. Like thinking about how does somebody even end up in the military, as we talked
yeah.
about in the pre-production, the marketing campaign around that, be all you can be,
Mm,
like all those things that we saw, see the world, like get a chance to go to these different places. Those are programs that people follow. And a lot of young people, especially at that time, they were being recruited or they were being chosen to go into the military.
mhm.
So you either follow along with the program like Anthony did, or you're going to be like Jose, where the program can get you anyway.
Drafted 1A status.
Right. But it's a part of it. So yeah.
So I got my last question is a follow-up, if you will, a segue. Is NYC a psyop? Now, what I mean by that is you got this New York City, and the major theme, Frank Sinatra sang about it. If you can make it here, you can make it everywhere. So these people, they wear their trauma as a badge of honor, stress, duress, all of it. They love it.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm struggling to pay for this 1-bedroom apartment, or not even a bedroom, a studio, and I'm paying $3,000, basically a mortgage, just so I can say I lived in New York. Right. Now, for those that don't know what a PSYOP is, you're talking about a psychological operation. So essentially a military operation in which, you're using high amounts of propaganda to influence everything from your opinions, your lifestyle, everything, just your total actions in favor of doing or accomplishing this desired dream, effect, or whatever have you. Like, I live in New York, what is it? Sex in the City, what is it? The Devil Wears Prada, like all these movies around the hype of living in New York. And miraculously, they have these lovely suites and they're furnished with everything, yet they work a 9 to 5 in which they're a administrative assistant. I don't know how you afford it, but whatever. Nonetheless, I digress. My point is, do you think that this movie being set in the Bronx during this period of the birth of hip hop, essentially, and the lack of fundamental things and classes that they had in school at that time, from anything from the theater to drama to, all the arts were taken out, instruments, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think New York is a psyop?
Well, I would say that if you have that many references in your mind that you can readily grab onto to reinforce the idea of living in a certain place or living in a certain lifestyle in a certain place, you have to at least ask yourself if there's a program that's being formed to get you to do that, right? Because that's like you said, you're in New York, concrete jungle where dreams are made of. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Like you said, all the cities, all the like there is an intentional design to program people's thinking to want to do things and to keep you focused on that pursuit of that thing, sometimes to your detriment. Like you said, like how many people are living, whether it's New York City or somewhere else, and New York City as idea is not a bad place. Like maybe not my speed, but that's fine for people to live there. But what's the real drive? Like, what is the thing that's pushing the idea in our heads that you have to live this lifestyle? I have to be able to live, like you said, in this type of apartment, in this type of neighborhood, eat this type of food, wear these type of clothes, wear these type of shoes. That is like been promoted so many different ways by so many different things. Is it a psyop? Maybe, probably, most likely, could be.
Well, I mean,
could be all those, man. Could be.
I mean, there is a phrase, something along the lines of rich people live in LA to basically promote their lifestyle, right? Whereas rich people in New York live there as a means of serving their penance or to perpetuate their misery.
That's what they say about New York City.
I'm just saying.
Dang.
You know what I mean? Kind of like how
I've never heard that.
Yeah, kind of like how people in New York are jerks, but they'll help you out. You know what I mean? Whereas people in LA are polite, but they're a-holes. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a difference. Like in New York, they'll
Mm.
tell you like, yo, you're no good. But if they see you stranded on the side of the road, they'll help you out. Whereas
Help
in
you out.
LA, they'll see you stranded on the night on the road and they'll be like, hope you have a nice day. And they'll keep driving
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. Would it also be a self-driving car coming soon to pick you up? So you'll be all right, man. All right, let's get into the popcorn, man. Well, how many boxes are you giving it? I know you're giving it 10. So go ahead. Let me
I
hear
hate this movie. 2.5.
it. 2.5. All right. Okay, 2.5. I'm giving it 3.5. I was kind of on the fence on it. I think this conversation kind of helped me move it down a little bit. Just how the movie, like I said, there's a lot of good things in it. It doesn't land it perfectly, but I do like that it's a 100% a black film.
Oh yeah.
What it doesn't do that a lot of times I think our black films try to do is try to over-index the idea of what's the message. Like so many, like you talked about this when we did Baby Boy.
Yep.
Like how many times are you gonna say, Jody, you need to take care of your kids? It happens so many
Just like
times in the
that
movie.
too. Oh man.
By the end, you're like, okay, Jody, please take care of your kids. Like that's the movie. That's the point. Dead Presidents doesn't really try to do that with you. It lays out these things, these elements, and it kind of asks you as the audience to figure it out. It probably could have explained a little bit more what the point was. That might have been a little bit more helpful. But I like that as a moviegoer, it didn't kind of like preach to me too much. The point.
That's interesting.
3.5 is where it ends, man. We got hot takes. So we got hot takes. We don't know what the hot takes are.
Nope.
You don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. So this is our first time hearing it. What's your hot take on this film, man?
Besides the fact that I hate it, I'm gonna go with this. There is nothing more American than black people, and I say that because this movie reinforces it. You have black people. I'll put it to you like this. I don't know if any other nation, state, country, continent whatsoever on planet Earth in which the very same entity hates and despises a certain section, but yet they force them to love that very same nation entity. And this movie literally on full display in every realm of the emotional spectrum reinforces that idea, from the very sense of, oh, you're going to fight this war for us against other people that very well could be your own kin, to the point of, oh, and when you come home, we're going to continue to disrespect you from a human standpoint, to your very sexuality, to your very gender. We're going to reinforce that you're nothing but a boy to us. And we all know the connotation and denotation of that word from a racial standpoint when said by a white male. On top of all of that, your own woman, your partner, won't respect you either. We will break up your family. We will not provide you with the resources for you like we did for those in World War II with the GI Bill or whatever have you. We'll have you dependent upon the system, the very system that will disappoint you time after time.
There it is. That's a perfect segue to my hot take, which is that this movie, if I could redo anything in this, I would actually make it more about Delilah's character than everybody else's.
Wow.
And not because I'm a big Nebuchadnezzar Wright fan, but because to the points that you're making, in the background of this, there's this idea of black people becoming awakened to the systemic inequalities you're talking about and trying to figure out how to overcome them. But the movie never really gets into that enough. You see one speech, you might see her listening to James Brown, you might see her try to recruit Anthony, but you don't really get the fullness of the ideology of the time and why the ideology was so prominent at that time with the other things that were happening. So I think like this movie, if this movie were to ever get done again, I would say focus on that character, because you can still do all the drama about, the difference between her and Juanita and Anthony and all that. That would be a good subplot. But I would love to see like that kind of telling of the story of like, what does it mean like when a woman's going through that Black Power movement progress at that time in that kind of shifting Bronx neighborhood.
And that's all the more reason why if they do remake this, it cannot be anything other than some type of Netflix series, whether it be on Amazon or
it's a good idea.
It can't be done as far as another 2 hour, whatever have you. And the talent that you're going to have to get for that, you're going to have to scour the earth for that joint.
Yeah, because it would be a good thing. Yeah, it'll be a good one. All right, man. So that is that. Yo, we're done with that. We talked about the popcorn. We did our hot takes. Next week we are coming back with Needle in a Time Stack.
Yeah.
So it's a Mr. Will pick,
Yes,
man. We're
sir.
gonna have a good time breaking that one down and talking about it. Once again, the Sticky Floors podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify Podcasts. We are on YouTube on our YouTube page where we want you to like, subscribe, and share to help our channel grow, and also continue to comment because we like reading the comments, we like responding to them, and they help us to improve the show. So we will see you next week as we continue this journey of breaking down movies. Peace.